back today, guys. Today we're going to be getting into a little bit more of chapter 18 and the compromises over slavery. Okay, so yesterday we talked a little bit about the Compromise of 1850, one of the last kind of compromises before the Civil War happens. We also talked about one part of the Compromise of 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Act. Okay, today we're going to be going through a couple more things having to deal with slavery right before the Civil War. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Gadsden Purchase, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is probably one of the biggest things. And then we'll see some of the effects of the Kansas-Nebraska Act on the United States here right before the Civil War. Okay, so we're still in between about 1850 and 1860 here. Okay, so one thing that we see, okay, after kind of the Compromise of 1850, after the Fugitive Slave Act, okay, kind of part of that is a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin. All right, so Harriet Beecher Stowe was an abolitionist who wrote a novel that would electrify the nation called Uncle Tom's Cabin. All right, so Stowe put a face to the suffering of slaves by proving the injustice of slavery by appealing to her readers' emotions. Okay, so the novel tells the story of Tom, who was a slave, who was being treated cruelly by a brutal master. All right, and through Tom's experiences and those of other characters, readers began to witness the terrible effects of slavery. Okay, so Northerners, abolitionists at this point know that slavery is bad. Okay, but Uncle Tom's Cabin finally kind of puts a face to that. Okay, they have a character that they can kind of relate to and see what he is going through at this time. Okay, so there's a call to action. So Uncle Tom's Cabin caused an immediate sensation. It had an enormous impact on public opinion in the North, leading to increased support for abolition in the North. So the South rejected the novel as unfair and an exaggerated view of slavery. Okay, so the South wasn't happy with it. The North, it led to increased support for abolition. All right, even in the South, it was banned in some places. So in the South, if you lived in a certain area, you couldn't even read Uncle Tom's Cabin. All right, the novel kind of does a little bit bigger than exposing slavery. It also exposed the deep divisions that existed between the North and the South. Okay, so that deep kind of hatred, those divisions that the two regions have on the issue of slavery. Okay, so moving on to the Gadsden Purchase. Okay, now in 1853, President Franklin Pierce wanted to build a transcontinental railroad that would connect the southern states to the Pacific coast. Okay, he also wanted to settle a land dispute with Mexico, so he sent James Gadsden to Mexico to negotiate a land deal. In the Gadsden Purchase, the U.S. agreed to pay Mexico $10 million in exchange for roughly 30,000 square mile expanse of land that would become Arizona and New Mexico. And that's over here in the map right here, this little kind of orangish peach section down here that says Gadsden Purchase. Okay, that is what we bought from Mexico. Okay, this purchase established the southern border of the U.S. that we know today and provided an ideal path for a southern transcontinental railroad. Okay, so this is important because now we own all of the land that is the contiguous 48 states. Okay, so all of the land that touches each other, you know, excluding Alaska and Hawaii, we now own all of that land. All right, not all of them are states yet, but we at least own all of that land. All right, now the purchase had to be approved by Congress before it could be finalized. And tensions between the North and the South over the issue of slavery made it difficult to approve that purchase. Because if you can see here, the southern border of Missouri, okay, that land is below that Missouri Compromise line. So Northerners thought that the real reason for this purchase was to add more territory for slavery. Okay, so they thought there were some fishy things going on. As a result, the purchase involved a smaller piece of land than originally planned. So this was actually going to be bigger. We were going to own more of what is today Mexico. But because the Northerners thought that it was going to add to more slave territory, it became a smaller piece of land. So the Gadsden Purchase was finalized in 1854. Again, one of the main effects of this okay, or one of why it's significant is that this gives us all of the land that we have today, minus Alaska and Hawaii. Okay. All right, now the big thing, the Kansas-Nebraska Act here. Okay. So Congress faced another dilemma as they were debating the Gadsden Purchase, and that was what to do with the land west of Missouri. Okay, so you can kind of see in this map, here's Missouri, here's this unorganized territory. What are we going to do with that? So Senator Stephen Douglas, just talked about him with the Compromise of 1850, he wanted to build a transcontinental railroad as well, except not through the South. He wanted it to run from Chicago here in Illinois. Okay. So in order to build that railroad from Chicago through the West out to the Pacific, he needed the unorganized territory here to be incorporated into the Union. Okay. So we needed to own it, name it, kind of put laws there. Okay. So Douglas proposed that the land be split into two territories, Kansas and Nebraska. Okay. And you can see that in this map here. We have Kansas here on the bottom, Nebraska here to the north. So to win Southern support for this, Douglas proposed that the territories would use popular sovereignty to decide on the issue of slavery, just like we did with the Compromise of 1850 with Utah and New Mexico. All right, Southerners were thrilled. Of course, they have the opportunity to get more slave territories or slave states added to the Union. Northerners, of course, on the other hand, were enraged. All right, they were very upset about this. All right, and this is why. Because Northerners were upset because according to that Missouri Compromise here, that line, you can kind of see on this map, slavery shouldn't be allowed in either of those territories because it's above the Missouri Compromise line. Okay, so basically opening up these territories was like ripping up the compromise altogether. Okay, and that's basically what it does. When the Kansas-Nebraska Act is finalized and it's passed in 1854, it nullifies the Missouri Compromise. Okay, so they basically get rid of the Missouri Compromise and the Kansas-Nebraska Act takes its place. Okay, so the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed in 1854. Again, Douglas hoped that this compromise would be peaceful, but of course it sent the nation into turmoil. Okay, just another one of those dominoes or another rung on the ladder leading to the Civil War. Okay, so one of the effects of the Kansas-Nebraska Act is bleeding Kansas. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act decided that the territories would use popular sovereignty to decide the issue of slavery. This led to people moving into the territories to sway the vote. Okay, so you would have people who were against slavery moving in to vote no for slavery. You would have people who wanted slavery move in to vote for slavery. All right, which is very illegal, okay, but it was being done. Now, Nebraska was largely against slavery and things went over pretty peacefully. Okay, so Nebraska basically votes no. There was enough support there. But things in Kansas become violent, okay? So when elections were held in Kansas, people from Missouri, where slavery was allowed, flooded over the territory line to vote for pro-slavery candidates, okay, in these elections. Attacks were launched, okay? There were people injured, there were people killed, and this time became known as Bleeding Kansas, okay? People are being killed, injured all over the territory, okay? So they called Kansas Bleeding Kansas. Now, another effect that we see come from the Kansas-Nebraska Act is a new political party. So the conflict over the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the violence of Bleeding Kansas had political consequences as well. Okay, the Whig Party, which is one of the popular parties here, so we basically have the Whigs and the Democrats at this point, was torn apart along geographical lines. You can guess, north and south. All right, so Northern Whigs had opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, while Southern Whigs, of course, supported it. All right, so Southern Whigs go and join the Democratic Party, which is the symbol is the donkey, after these events. Northern Whigs, however, create a new political party called the Republican Party, and theirs is an elephant. Yes, this is the Republican Party that we see today. Okay, so now here in the 1850s, we finally see the two political parties that we have today. Okay, and that will basically be your two major political parties up until today. Okay, And of course, Abraham Lincoln would become the prominent voice of the new Republican Party. Okay. So, Kansas-Nebraska Act and its effects here are going to get a little bit into chapter 19 as well. Okay. Where these divisions get wider. And this is another effect of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. All right. So, the violence of bleeding Kansas actually spilled out onto the Senate floor. Charles Sumner, who was a Republican from Massachusetts, gave a speech in the Senate where he insults the other senators for supporting the Kansas-Nebraska Act. All right. Representative Preston Brooks from South Carolina was so mad with Sumner for insulting one of his family members that he felt he had the need to defend his family. So Brooks goes and attacks Sumner in the Senate with his metal-tipped cane. Okay, so you have a member of the House of Representatives literally walking into the Senate floor and beating a sitting senator with a cane. Okay, so Southerners supported Brooks because they thought he defended the dignity of the South. And abolitionists supported Sumner, the guy who got beat, because he was fighting against slavery. So, of course, this attack, again, another domino, increases tensions between the North and the South. Okay, and just another domino toward the Civil War. Okay, so that's all that I have for today. All right, getting through chapter 18 and 19 here. All right. Next, you'll be working on your Kansas-Nebraska Act. Of course, if you have any questions or anything, you can talk to me. All right. But if not, we will see you next time.